Welcome to Lyme Support Network Podcast, hosted by Hoshi Therapy Tribe. In each episode, we talk with someone from the Lyme community, like a doctor, warrior, coach, advocate, or an entrepreneur, to hear their personal story and insights. Today, our focus is on a Lyme warrior and advocate. Our guest is Aoife Rankin. After 15 years of unexplained symptoms and medical dismissals, Aoife was finally diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease in 2023. She has turned her struggles into a mission to raise awareness, fight for justice, and empower other Lyme warriors. Along the way, Aoife's story is one of the resilience, hope, and transformation. I am thrilled to have her here to share her journey. Aoife, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Sivi.
Aoife, your journey to the Lyme disease diagnosis has been long and challenging. How did it feel when you were finally given a name for what you had been struggling with for so many years?
I suppose, when I was first diagnosed, my doctor had said I had either Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, or ME. And I knew at the time it was Lyme disease because at that stage, I had already been treated for antibiotics and I couldn't get off them. So I knew it had to be that. And I was very shocked though, really shocked, but I suppose relieved to have a name to whatever was causing my symptoms and causing me to end up in hospital. I was just going from hospital to hospital in the months previous to that. I'd been in hospital. I'd been in A&E, about 5 times in the 8 months before that, in the lead up to that diagnosis. And that, obviously, not to mind. I was 15 years altogether waiting for that diagnosis. And in that period of time, I, had endometriosis, which just spiraled out of control very shortly after I had been bitten. Of course, I wasn't aware I had been bitten by a tick. I didn't even know what ticks were. I had moved out to Connemara in the countryside and on the west coast of Ireland, and I'd never heard of a tick before. I'd moved out from the city. So I basically underwent a number of surgeries for the endometriosis, which weren't working. Then resulted, after 3 laparoscopies, I had to have a hysterectomy because my womb was rejecting my body. Previous to that, it had started where my tonsils had to be removed. Then my gallbladder had to be removed. And, after the womb was removed, it just kind of became an ongoing joke of, what's going to be removed next? Because 9 months after having the hysterectomy, when I thought it was all over, all my symptoms came back again. So I was back on that journey trying to figure out what was wrong with me. But I was going to be another 4 years until I actually found out that it was actually chronic Lyme disease.
So before it got diagnosed, how many doctors approximately you have consulted with?
Oh my God, so many. Over 15 years. Just so many. Doctors, obviously mainly consultants. I'd been over to London twice, once for the treatment for the hysterectomy and treatment of endometriosis, which wasn't going anywhere. And also because the Lyme had really exacerbated my symptoms there. And also had been over because I had developed interstitial cystitis of the bladder, which is a very common symptom of Lyme's disease. And I mean, it was a regular occurrence being in hospital. and I had just accepted that it was endometriosis and put it down to that. But obviously, after having the womb removed, I realized, okay, there's more to this. There's something else going on. And I mean, literally, I was just they were basically, the Lyme was making its way around my organs and, attacking them. And in the end, after I'd been diagnosed, my heart had become quite badly affected. And that is how I ended up going to hospital in Germany, going to St. George Hospital in Bad Aibling for treatment.
So why I asked the question of how many doctors you have met? See, even now, as you know, 500,000 patients are there, and they will be in a similar situation. So they should not feel that I have met 10 doctors and there is no end. That's the end. There is no solution, and this is the end. So when you tell that I have seen this many number of doctors and now I have recovered, so it's a hope for them. So that's why that question I asked.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's really, really important to be your own doctor as well. I was just very lucky. I have a very good GP, general practitioner doctor here in Ireland, because it is very difficult to diagnose. That I do understand. But I mean, there were so many consultants every year for the 15 years, and especially in the last 4 years. So definitely, if you know you've been bitten by a tick, get yourself a Lyme literate doctor straight away. But otherwise, I would definitely 100%, you have to be your own doctor. You have to, do your research. And this is something I learned, with time. You cannot expect the doctor or the consultant to have all the information, because it's just not going to happen. It's just not practical. And there's no point in expecting it. Yes, they should probably have that information, but unfortunately, you have to just go in fully armed with all that information. And I've often done it and proposed different treatments that could be done. And it's really the best route forward.
So you suggest advocacy to the doctors?
Sorry?
Advocate the doctors about what you want.
Yes. Yeah. Know what you want. Be open to their, to what they have to say as well. I mean, they do have the expertise, but depending on who you go to, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I have stories upon stories of being, misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, gaslighted. I mean, I remember the first surgeon that said to me, Aoife, you're going to be in pain for the rest of your life. And that was only 3 or 4 years into the journey. And I just broke down and thought, how can you say this to me? And I just became really strong-willed and decided, no, that doesn't have to be the case. And there wasn't a stone unturned in trying. I know it took a long time, but there wasn't a stone unturned in trying to get to the solution, to get to the root cause of the problem.
Okay. Can you share some of the symptoms that you experienced during the 15 years before your diagnosis? How did they impact your daily life?
Yeah, so I suppose the biggest symptoms, to begin with, I was a teacher at the time when I first started to get symptoms, and my colleague told me that I went from being this really bubbly person that was full of energy, and literally overnight, I just was exhausted. I would be at work and look at the floor and just think I would lie there and sleep right now, I remember waking up in the morning and being absolutely just exhausted at 7 o'clock, wondering how people were able to go to work at that time, looking out onto the main road. And yeah, so those, the fatigue and I also used to get weak very easily. So for someone that was quite active, that I found that quite difficult. And then the brain fog started to develop. And that was very frustrating because in my job as a teacher, especially, you have to be quick on the ball. And I was, my memory, I was forgetting words. My memory was kind of lapsing, and I just did not have the mental or physical energy to keep going, and eventually had to kind of leave that profession. So as time went on, and I suppose in the last 2 years, symptoms wise, so I've been told it's neurological Lyme, and so I would go through the flares, but I became very sensitive, like oversensitive to noise. Anything to touch. If I put any products on my skin. 2 weeks ago, my skin completely broke out everywhere. So in boils from an infection, and so the fatigue and all of those symptoms would gradually become worse when you went into a flare. So I also developed the chronic pains. So the chronic pains were in my limbs, and I had desperate pain where I'd had the endometriosis as well, where I'd take time off work. The flares were horrendous. When I fell into a flare, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't even get to the kitchen to get myself water, not to mind a cup of tea or breakfast. And I was, when you have a Lyme flare, you go into a deep depression, and because you'll either sleep non-stop or you go into insomnia where you can't, and you can't read a book. You don't have the concentration or even the willpower to read a book. My eyes were quite sore. And my eyesight wasn't great, was very clouded. I would vomit non-stop. So that was a huge symptom in the last 2 years. So I was vomiting, and just the depression that came with that flare was horrendous. And you would have, that would last a week, and you'd go from being this completely miserable person in the bed to being this very happy person the next day when it had kind of left, But I've taken note of all my symptoms for chronic Lyme disease, because I'd seen online that people had 30 symptoms or so. So I thought I couldn't have that many symptoms. So I wrote them all out, and it came to 39 symptoms altogether that I had. So if I was to sum it all up, so very debilitating. But the worst part with the illness is when you go into a flare, and there's no coming out of that. You need to sleep, and there's no coming out of it for me. The vomiting took over as well, and you felt like you're dying. I just felt like I was dying, and combination of everything coming in together, and then you'd get out of it, and you'd have a little break of a week or so, and then you'd be back in another one, because they were literally, I was getting them every second week, until even when they'd started me on antibiotics. So when I got diagnosed, I was started on triple therapy antibiotics by a consultant here in Ireland, an infectious disease consultant, and that they gradually started to work and relieve the symptoms. And I definitely had a lot more energy, which I didn't have, previously. But yeah, look, at little did I know that when I eventually tried to come off the antibiotics, and at that stage, I was on antibiotics for over 2 years because I'd been taking them for interstitial cystitis of the bladder, which they thought would work. So it was well over 2 years. And when I tried to come off the antibiotics, I was right back to square one, which was just like the world came crashing down on top of me. It's just the disbelief that to be putting these, antibiotics are great, but to be putting these pharmaceutical drugs into my body for that length of time, was so worrying. And to know now that they had not worked to kill the Lyme and the co-infections that I had in my system was devastating. So at that stage, it was recommended that I go abroad for treatment because I was told by my medical team that there was nothing more they could do for me in Ireland. So I found St. George Hospital in Bad Aibling in Germany, and they offered 5 weeks of treatment. And I went there in April. So I'm nearly 3 months back from my treatment in St. George Hospital.
Oh. And how are you feeling now? How was the treatment? The result, effect of the treatment.
The treatment was incredible. Even the fact that I can sit up on this chair and speak to you. And as one friend said, you actually can sit upright now, because I wasn't able to even, it was so difficult to even do that. I was in bed, sitting upright, maybe on the bed most of the time, but I couldn't even hold the phone up when I was in bed, to even send text to someone. And yeah, since it's extraordinary, the difference since I've come back. Now, I did have a problem from taking the antibiotics. I developed Clostridium difficile. So I ended up in hospital 3 times. In A&E, I was brought to hospital by ambulance. If you haven't had Clostridium difficile, it's horrendous and the pain is excruciating. And I literally, when it comes on a flare, I just kept collapsing with the pain, and I was trying to get my phone to call an ambulance. But it's kind of cleared up somewhat, but that's probably due to all of the antibiotics. So if anyone offers you antibiotics solely for Lyme disease, say no. You need to look into, and that's what St. George Hospital taught me, that you need to look into herbal remedies and the alternative therapies as well. Now, I was doing acupuncture, but what I needed was 5 weeks in hospital to get me off, because at that point, Sylvia, I couldn't get off the antibiotics. I was so sick. So they got me off the antibiotics, and they did a number of different therapies that basically worked, because my energy levels are so much better now. I've probably, like, the pains I don't get. What's incredible is my circadian rhythm has started working. So I actually can go to bed, fall asleep, and wake up at the same time every morning. Like, that's extraordinary. I hadn't, that was such a struggle for me in the last 15 years. I was very dependent on sleeping tablets. And yeah, the symptoms of the interstitial cystitis of the bladder greatly relieved. I've none of the tingling, but the oversensitivity in my ears and the rest of my body has greatly relieved, because there was a time where I couldn't even hold the phone up to my ear because it was so painful. And What else? I suppose, yeah, my system just on the inside has started to improve. The only thing is I have to pace myself. So if I overdo it, my heart gets affected. So if I do too much, I basically end up where I get palpitations. This is when I'm lying down, I get palpitations and chest pains. So that doesn't show up on an ECG. So that's quite scary. And at the moment, believe it or not, I'm waiting because of the Clostridium difficile. I'm waiting to get fecal microbiota transplant therapy for that. But that's actually been quite successful for people with chronic Lyme disease. So hopefully that'll put the good bacteria back into my system. Yes, I did take probiotics every day religiously while I was on the antibiotics. But
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any, like when you're on 3 different antibiotics, I don't know if there's any probiotic that would, undo that damage that they can do. And now I have found 1 or 2 since that I've started taking, but yeah, again, you see, it's all about doing the research, but you're so exhausted. If you're alone, as I was, I just didn't have the energy to research, to do research. I didn't have the concentration. I wasn't able to do that. So it was tricky.
So usually for Lyme disease, so they do the first gut health and detox the body.
Yes.
So what about you? You did the detox protocols?
So in Germany, is it?
No, so far, not in
So
Germany. Yeah.
yeah. Look, what's it? You see, the thing is, there is very little information and available in Ireland. And to be honest, when I went on social media, because initially I didn't want to know about it, I had decided, okay, they've given me antibiotics. I've been guaranteed that these antibiotics will get rid of 70% of my symptoms. I thought psychologically I'll get that, up to 90% and it'll be gone. And I didn't want to know anything about Lyme disease. I didn't want to know that I could have the rest of my life. I didn't know what was true and what was not, misinformation and so on. So I abstained from the internet and quickly realized when the antibiotics didn't work, I had to get back on the internet to get information. So I joined social media and it was through people abroad, and even more so in Canada and the US, that I gathered the information that I needed. And you're hearing all these words I kept hearing detox. And I wasn't getting that information when I was on the antibiotics. So which was really obviously very important, especially when you're being plunged into these flares all the time. So I kind of learned a bit then when I got to even before I went to Germany, did my research, went to Germany, and they did several different treatments and kind of stressed the importance of detoxing. So now I'm definitely onto that now all the time, But there was a number of treatments that they carried out in St. George Hospital, which I found really, really good. So they do the hypothermia. So the hypothermia treatment is carried out twice, usually for people with Lyme disease. And it's basically where they raise the body temperature to 41.6 degrees Celsius. And in my case, they raised it a bit higher. And the second session, they raised it to 42. Now, I believe, I don't know if it's true, but at 42.5, you can, you're dead. But so that was an incredible experience. Because after the second session, like, it completely knocks you out. You basically sleep for 24 hours afterwards. You have the most amazing sleep. But But I do remember after I had the second session, it was like I felt my brain starting to work. And my brain was so sluggish and so slow, and it went, to feel it kind of kicking back into action. I started getting these flashbacks. So I got 3 flashbacks of where I got the tick bite, which I didn't know. I had thought I got it somewhere else, but I actually was getting flashbacks of where I got the tick bite in the garden, planting edge and long grass all around me. And I mean, I could see them on my hands and, thought they were kind of little baby ladybirds but they were tiny. And yeah, I had all kinds of nightmares and, it was extraordinary what it did to my mood even, because when you've got Lyme, it's like you're walking around with like this dark cloud. And you just can't get rid of it. And I know with time since I've come back from St. George Hospital, the anxiety, which I didn't realize I had, is definitely gone. I'm mentally much stronger, and I'm not talking about capacity, but I'm talking mood wise. It's extraordinary what it has done to my mood.
So the problem with the brain fog is completely disappeared.
Yeah. And I know it's from that, and that was only one procedure of many. I mean, they do the blood filtering. So I had 2 blood filtering, which is also called plasmapheresis. I can't pronounce that, sorry, but it's like blood filtering. Anyway, they filter the blood to get rid of all the bacteria. And as well as the whole body hypothermia, they do, lots of different things. They do like a Papimi, they have this Papimi machine. It's an ion induction therapy machine. So they use kind of electromagnetic waves. And what that I think definitely did is removed blockages, and I had about 10 sessions in that, and that was extraordinary. They do lots of infusions, they had given me antibiotics intravenously when I first arrived, to get me off really the other antibiotics. And then they did a number of different infusions the whole way through. And they were lovely because they give you such a high. And actually, since I've come back from St. George, I've been getting infusions since because I find them fantastic. They also had the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. And they did a lot of treatments with laser therapy, so like blue laser therapy, which they put that actually in through the vein, so that was extraordinary. And then the red and green laser therapy they did. I have damage to my colon, and there is Lyme, more than likely in the tissues of my heart as well. But definitely they could say it was in my lower intestine. So they did a treatment for that, and they did colonoscopies and so on. So they're very well set up. They have a physio there. They do all kinds like Reiki, massage, and reflexology and so on and so on. And every day you're not sat in bed all day long. You literally you're up at 9 o'clock and you have a full schedule, and you have to, if you don't make your appointment, they'll come looking for you. But they were just so caring, Phoebe. They were really, really caring in the hospital. And it was the first time ever apart from my own doctor, who supported me incredibly so in the last 15 years, but the first time I was believed. There was no question asked. I was never asked, did I have it? It was straight into treatment as soon as I got there. And that it became a very emotional journey in that sense, because that really makes because your mood is up and down and very high because you're getting these different infusions, and just to be believed, to know that you've got somebody there that cares about you, that wants to make you better, that believes, that you have this really serious illness. It's just, it made me at the time quite angry at times when I was in hospital at the way I've been treated in the medical system over the years. And as much as the medics took my pain very seriously over the years, they never, looked at the root cause of the issues. It was just superficial level all the time. And so this was just top grade, care that I was getting in Germany. And it was just extraordinary. And even, you meet people there, other people that have Lyme disease. And, I've made a few friends from there. And, it's really cathartic and very, it's an experience that I'll never forget. And I remember even coming home having to leave and thinking, God, I'm going back out into the big bad world. You're so well kind of minded. It's very kind of, it's like a family run business in some respects, that there's a lovely warmth to some of the staff there and some of the nurses and consultants. So, it's hard to leave that when they believe you, I suppose. And yeah, there was an adjustment period when I came back. It was funny. It was strange.
And how you came to know about that hospital?
There was a local woman that had actually been bitten in the same place, the same area in Connemara, and she had attended that hospital. So because I'd contacted a few different people, but because she had been bitten in the same place, her symptoms were very much like mine. I just felt, even though I'd heard about other places, I felt this, because she was treated successfully, I felt that was the best route for me to go, because the probability was higher that I would heal and get better. Now, that said, a big bone of contention that I have is that the insurance company didn't cover that treatment, because it is very expensive. Yeah. So it's very easy to sit here and say, just go to St. George Hospital. For treatment for 5 weeks, it was 45,000. Huge amount of money. I had health insurance, so I thought I'll be fine. I'll be covered. My health insurance company, I actually was covered for treatment abroad with them. And I'd been paying for health insurance for, the best of 20 years. And when I needed it the most, they rejected it, because the Center for Disease Control in the US does not recognize it. So on those grounds, Leia Healthcare refused to cover me. So
they don't recognize chronic Lyme disease.
Yeah. They don't recognize chronic. That's it, chronic Lyme disease. Yeah. And yeah, it was just extraordinary living in Ireland and being told that in another country they don't recognize the CDC doesn't recognize it in the US. So therefore, you live in Europe, but it doesn't matter, we're not going to pay for it. Based on their beliefs, that system, which is criminal. It's absolutely criminal, because hindsight is a great thing. And if I would have gone straight to Germany if I'd known that it worked, and but obviously that's a big bill to have to pay back. But your health is more important, and it was worth every penny, because I couldn't keep living the way I was. I I was, I became very socially isolated, as you do with the chronic illness. And I was very lonely and I was losing friends. I haven't worked now in over 2 years. You do go through, in Germany, they say, takes about a year to recover. So they have told me between 8 months to a year to recover. So if I go back to work, I'm taking a huge chance. So I need to take that time to recover so that there's no relapse, because a relapse could throw me right back to the very beginning. So yeah, but it's great, to be moving forward.
So you have mentioned feeling heard and understood for the first time in Germany. How did that make a difference in your healing journey?
Yeah, like that legitimacy was to make a huge difference in so many ways. I mean, even like my confidence and self-esteem now is so much better because, you start to think hypochondriac can, that word can get thrown around. You get to the stage where when you're taking time off work, and now I was continuing doing courses and trying to progress, but when you get that, you get that recognition, it's extraordinary because you just feel, this is what was wrong with me all these years, and, when you think back to all those moments when people questioned you, there was one person that said, oh, here we go again. When I was taken from my place of work by ambulance to the hospital, and what people don't realize is no person wants to be sick. No person wants to have a chronic illness. I mean, you want to go out and be able to make a living. I mean, the hardest thing for me was not to be able to work and to lose that financial independence. That is the scariest thing ever, when you cannot work and you cannot make a living for yourself. So what they did, is they just, look, it's to be believed for all of those years. It does feel like there's a bit of an injustice. Not a bit, there's a complete injustice in terms of how I was treated by the medical system here in Ireland. It's the medical system here is appalling. And there's people walking around with chronic Lyme disease and, they're going undiagnosed. I mean, this can kill. Like, let's not mess around. Like, it can. And especially if it's undiagnosed, so if you think you have it, and I mean, it is suggested that people with chronic fatigue conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, and so on, do have chronic Lyme disease. I mean, if you think for a second that you have it, go and get a test done. I went to Ironman Labs in Germany. I was able to send my bloods to Germany from Ireland without going there and getting the tests done and getting the results back within a very short period of time. So don't opt for the standard test that they have in your country, because mostly they return, false negative. So you're best to go get tested in the likes of Ironman Labs in Germany. I know I've heard there's some good ones in the US as well. And get that done. Don't wait for a second opinion or for a doctor or consultant to send you. Because once you have that, it does make a huge difference.
In US, which is the test lab that you suggest?
For me, because I'm in Europe, I used Armin Labs in Germany.
Okay.
But I know I've heard there's quite a few reliable ones in the US.
No.
So yeah, so I definitely, if you think, even a 0.1% chance that you might have chronic Lyme disease, go get tested. I hear people with symptoms like chronic pain, and I think just go and get tested for it. It's worth every penny. If you can get to the stage, I'm healing now, but for a long time I wasn't, and it's you don't want to do that journey over 15 years. Because I suppose muscle memory, it stays in your system, and it's obviously the longer it's in your system untreated, the harder it is to get rid of it.
You have turned your past suffering into advocacy and empowerment for your Lyme disease patients. What motivated you to speak out, and how did you first started sharing your story?
I suppose what first started me on that road was actually the insurance company's decision to reject my case to be covered for treatment abroad, and I just was so taken aback by their correspondence, their letters, and I thought, wait a minute, what do I do now? I don't have money. I haven't worked in over 2 years. What's the system in Ireland going to do? So yeah, built up anger became rage, and I decided to turn that fire in my belly into a journey to get justice for people with chronic Lyme disease. So that's where I set up a TikTok account called Justice for the People with Lyme Disease. And yeah, and I haven't posted in the last few weeks because I wasn't great with the Clostridium difficile, and I didn't want to put any posts up until that had cleared. And I am back on antibiotics because of this other infection, but I'm hoping with this fecal microbiota transplant therapy that will put an end to me having to, opt for antibiotics every time this happens. But I will post now and just talk about what I've spoken about tonight, because I wanted to be 100% sure that it wasn't the antibiotics, because I was on vancomycin for the C. diff, and I didn't want to post and say I'm better or getting better, let's say, not better, but I'm getting better. And I didn't want to post when I wasn't 100% sure. But now I know, that I am improving. So I will put that up. And it's been fantastic being on social media, because, there's a lot of other people that are on the same journey, and they, encourage you on bad days. They give you the most, like you get great advice, and you get, different options from different people who've tried, different things. And, then you can decide based on your own research, which you believe is best. And that's just so necessary when you don't have a Lyme literate doctor in your country,
Really?
Yeah, we don't. Now there is one in the UK, but yeah, we don't. And that I just thought, like all of us thought, people I spoke to in Ireland anyway, that an infectious disease consultant, would do that job. But it's, you need a Lyme literate doctor, and there's no two ways about it.
So in our holistic therapy tribe platform, so we are having a session where the Lyme literate doctors, we have listed it out for USA. Lyme literate doctors. So we have just created a list of those doctors available in USA. Very soon we will be putting it across the other countries, for other countries as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's super.
Finding them is very difficult.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure, like, it is the case in Ireland, even for some doctors, they're afraid, of that their license will be withdrawn if they make a recommendation for you to go to Germany, and get that alternative treatment. So yeah, I know that is the case, that some are afraid, but a lot of them are in denial. A lot of them refuse to believe it. It's down to their training, but it's to look at somebody suffer so much and to refuse to believe. Actually, I had one consultant who I get on really well with, who looked after me actually when I was really sick going into hospital. And I used to beg him for antibiotics and he would give them to me. Even though he, like all the others, didn't believe in chronic Lyme disease. But the second time I remember going in, just before I went to Germany, because I knew at that stage I was really bad. My heart symptoms, like I said before, got quite bad. And I remember saying to him before I left, because he had noticed, I was trying to explain to him that, my pain wasn't being relieved by pain medication. And he started to see this, because when he gave me the antibiotic drip, he could see that my pain relieved, which it didn't with the pain medication. So I was like, yeah, now do you see that it is, an infection or infections? And I remember asking him before I left the hospital, I said, is there any alternative treatment that you can recommend or that you can provide for me here in the hospital that would help my symptoms? And he looked at me and he laughed and he said, Aoife, if I told you that, I'd be out of a job. I thought, oh, wow, that says it all, So yeah, so that was interesting. So obviously pharmaceutical drugs are the way to make money, and alternative therapy is just not. It's not something our society or the medical industry want to believe in at the moment.
Yeah, and see, out of the 90% of the Lyme aware or doctors specializing in Lyme is from integrative medicine, functional medicine, and herbal and natural. They are really successful.
Okay. Yeah.
Only the 10% they belongs to that category. And most of these doctors, they do detox and gut health.
Yes.
This is what I have observed. So observation is not on one couple of doctors. It's doctors practicing across USA.
And yeah, like you learn that gut health is just so incredibly important, And I know for me, I'm due to get the fecal microbiota transplant therapy to improve my gut health, because I keep getting the C. diff and infections. So I'm hoping after I get that in early September, that, I won't have to look at an antibiotic again. I won't keep developing these infections, these random, infections that are happening and symptoms of chronic Lyme.
What is one thing you wish people knew about Lyme disease that they don't often hear?
God, there's several things. I suppose one thing, like I said before, I would like for them to know what they need to do, like get a Lyme literate doctor and get a test done. But that aside, what I would like for people to know is the suffering that comes with chronic Lyme disease. It is the most horrendous thing you can go through. And that's what people don't know. So they will see you. I mean, when I left the house, people would see me and say, God, you're looking much better. You're looking great. And almost the next sentence was like, are you better? And no concept of, this continues, you can't just get better overnight, and yeah, that's really frustrating, because you're not believed. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't show, I mean, I could be walking down the street, I could be out walking tomorrow and have very little energy and nobody would know. And I mean, all we want is normality. We want a normal life. That's all I wanted. All I wanted was to be able to go back to work, go back to my hobbies, be fit, be active. And, you can't do that straight away. That all takes time. And, I'm out walking now, which is great. And you become very grateful though. I mean, after going through Lyme disease, but yeah, look, I'd love to see more programs, documentaries about it so that people really understood how horrendous it is. And therefore they would make sure to protect themselves when they're outside and to protect their children so that they don't get bitten. Or so that they, make sure to check them in case they have done. And yeah, people just don't realize how terrible of a journey it is. And there's some really good documentaries that document that very, very well. But when you're only seen outside when you're good, they don't see you when you're in bed and you can't lift your phone up to make a phone call or send a text message. They don't realize, they think that you're at home in bed reading your book. They don't see you when you can't eat, you're vomiting, you can't even get to the kitchen to get yourself a glass of water. Yeah, the doom and gloom that comes with it as well,
How do you manage your Lyme symptoms today? What treatments or therapies are currently part of your routine?
And so at the moment, I have finished the herbal protocol that Germany had put me on. So I was on a number of herbs. I have started a few different herbs now, and to help settle certain things in my body. I'm also getting infusions done. So I get infusions done locally in the Wellness Nurse Clinic here in Galway, and there's 2 nurses that run that clinic, and they're fantastic. And they've given me infusions of vitamin C and is it ALA? I think for detox as well, and glutathione and vitamin B, and so that's really good. I'm getting those at the moment, but you have to also pace yourself, and you have to make sure you get sleep. So yeah, you can only do so much in a day, and that applies not just physically but mentally as well. And but I can do an awful lot more than I was able to do, which is extraordinary. And yeah, eating well, not eating sugar and no processed foods, and
No gluten?
yeah, I was about to say I largely eat meat. So I'll eat I find the vegetables hard with the C. diff at the moment. But I had started a keto before I went into hospital. I'd been on it when I got diagnosed. And yeah, I could have a dinner where I just have fish. I might have 2 or 3 slices of fish. Or I'd have steak and veg. And so bread is a treat if I go out for dinner, which I generally don't. And so I like homemade food, because if I eat anything that doesn't look, if you eat processed foods or foods that aren't, nutritious, like meat and veg, it's just downward slope, isn't it?
So, what role has community support groups played in your journey? How important is it for Lyme patients to connect with others who understand their experience?
Well, I suppose the community support groups really have come in the form of social media. And I suppose, on Facebook, there was one or two that I was part of. And look, they can frighten the daylights out of you initially, but then they're great support and you can make friends through them and they become a lifeline then, that you really desperately need. And when you're in a flare, to be able to reach out, to people and that understand what you're going through, it's just incredible. It's, it's fantastic. And, you really feel nurtured when you're part of those groups. And they're definitely, they're up there with the Lyme literate doctor and testing. I definitely say you need that kind of support, because unfortunately your family members and friends in most cases just won't understand, and nobody's going to understand until they've been through it. Like, that's bottom line. They can try, but you just can't. And there's something so, the feeling, look, I had endometriosis and adenomyosis, and so I know what it's like to have a chronic illness. But with Lyme disease, with chronic Lyme disease, you have fear on top of it, because you don't know what's going to happen with your heart. You don't know if you're going to get better. It's that, underlying anxiety. It's like they said in Germany, your nervous system, the autonomic nervous system of a person with chronic Lyme disease is damaged. It's irritated. And so, of course, you're going to be subjected to anxiety, and the fear is going to be tenfold. And you don't have the supports around you. That support network, yes, it was online, but, you don't have the support network from the medical system. You don't have you could end up in hospital, which has happened to me. And where there has been 3 times I have ended up in hospital where I've been screaming with pain. So they literally have left me. And I trying to explain to them, this is going to get worse. You need to treat me now. You need to give me something. And, I ended up screaming with the pain, and that shouldn't happen.
How did your medical dismissals and misdiagnosis you faced contribute to your drive to raise awareness and challenge the system?
I suppose on social media that really stood out, but I also, there was newspaper articles in the local paper twice, and just to get the word out. And you do, I think for a lot of people, you develop that fire in your belly when you're being misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. And, so that's why I set up the social media account and, push through to try and get the word out that this is just not acceptable. And I worry about young people that go into the system and are ignored, are, misunderstood. And that's an awful, people with chronic Lyme disease have to endure these symptoms while at work. I have friends that are working, and, it's not easy. You could be doing an interview for a job, and the difference between you and another candidate that's healthy, and And that's not taken into consideration. So there's so many injustices, not just in terms of the health system not recognizing it and not providing the treatment. There's so many injustices, in so many different areas. So it's good to have a voice. It's one of the pros, I suppose, in social media. We're very, very good at criticizing social media, but it's good in that sense because, it gives us a kind of a platform where we can speak out.
Your story is an example of resilience. How do you stay motivated to keep fighting, especially when things seem tough?
I suppose I'm on the battleground a long time. So I know that there's no one coming to save me. So, the only person you can save is yourself. And I have learned that perspective is really, really important when it comes to illness. And you have to work on yourself mentally and emotionally as well. And, that strength, maybe it came from that incident with that consultant years ago when he told me I would have pain forever. It changed something, it rewired my brain where I thought, no. And that's where I kind of stood up and took a stance, and decided there has to be another way. There has to be a solution for this. And it's the way my brain is wired, that there's a solution for everything. So that's been really helpful. You have bad days. Look, I don't think like that when I'm having a bad day. Not that I have bad days actually. I don't have bad days anymore like I used to, but because it is very difficult when you have chronic Lyme to be strong, but it's all you have. You are all you have. And if you can't rely on yourself to take a stand and to be strong, then what else do you have in life? Just four walls to look at? Because you'll end up in bed and you'll never get out of there. So maybe it's the fear as well. But perspective and positive mindset is really important.
Now you are an advocate. What are some of the key things you hope to see in the Lyme disease care system?
I'd like to think that the Centre for Disease Control would recognise it. I'm hoping that Robert Kennedy Jr. might make a change there. I think I get kind of funny looks when I say that, but he himself had chronic Lyme disease and so has his family. So I've been holding out hope that he will make a difference there, that he will make a change, bring about change there, because kind of, when I got sick, actually, another thing I did was I wrote to every politician in Ireland. I forgot about that. And I put in the subject line, how are you going to get me back to work? And I wrote to our Minister for Health and I asked her to investigate chronic Lyme and, she refused. So I can't see change happening here in Ireland unless it happens in the US, and I mean, once, the training of doctors seriously needs to change, and there needs to be, but see, none of this can happen without it being recognised. But yeah, we need more Lyme literate doctors. We need to get rid of the standard testing, which isn't working. We need to, most importantly, put money into research. So there's, this is like akin to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, back in the late 1900s, and it's the same thing. But they're actually getting so much funding now, which is not really needed as much because they've got to a stage much further down the line than we have. And, if you were to compare the two in terms of funding, It's crazy. There's literally no funding. There's one consultant that operates in Ireland, and he's never got any grant funding for the work he's done. And yeah, they're not providing funding to this area. So once it's recognized, I'd love to see that funding being provided to company, or sorry, to the sector, so we could improve matters. Sorry, I'm getting tired now.
Once recognized, automatically the insurance they have to give.
Yeah,
Then
exactly. Yeah.
half the headache is over.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I should have mentioned the insurance companies, but that goes without saying, Look, it could go on for a long time talking about them, But yeah, like a lot of organizations, they're there to profit off us and our illness, which is criminal. They should be shut down.
So what changes do you think are needed in diagnosis and treating Lyme disease?
So the changes that are needed, well, doctors need to be trained. Once it's recognized, doctors need to be trained on how to work with patients with chronic Lyme. But the whole medical industry needs to be updated and informed about the illness and how unpredictable it can be and how it doesn't show up on tests, and the suffering that's involved, the deep, horrendous suffering. And I mean, not to compare, but I know that the consultant in Germany had said they work with patients that have cancer and who have chronic Lyme disease. And, he said having chronic Lyme is much worse. And, my mother and another person who had cancer both said, that their journey was much easier than mine. Because it's chronic Lyme isn't recognized,
So what advice would you give to those who are still in the midst of their diagnosis journey or struggling to find the right treatment for Lyme disease?
So yeah, get themselves a test, get a blood test done to ensure that they have it, and then get themselves to a Lyme literate doctor. I mean, it doesn't always show up on the test either, so it is worth going to a Lyme literate doctor if you really feel you might have it. And I know for a lot of them, including my own actually consultant, they will treat you based on the symptoms you have, as opposed to the problem I had was I was on antibiotics before I did the test. So it wasn't 100% accurate, and it probably wouldn't be anyway in other cases. But so get the test, Lyme literate doctor, get yourself on social media if you can, and get yourself into community groups, to get answers to your questions, because there's some good books out there. And I know I really find Richard Horowitz is very good. He's got a new book out, and recently another book, I think. And also Dr. Rawls has got herbal protocols, which I found really good and excellent books. And this is the information you get online when you join these communities, which is great. And make sure to have people that they can reach out to when they're quite bad. That's going to be very, very important when you're really, really sick. And get yourself an insurance company that believes in chronic Lyme.
So now I am having a couple of rapid fire questions. So the answer is expected to be in one word, two words, or in one sentence or two sentences.
Okay.
So, what is one thing you have learned about yourself during your Lyme disease journey?
I have learned that I'm very resilient and very, very, very strong. And yeah, because they were tested, and yeah, that's what I've learned.
If you could give one piece of advice to someone newly diagnosed with the Lyme disease, what would it be?
Just like I said there earlier, get to a Lyme literate doctor, not the infectious disease consultant. No, Lyme literate doctor is the best way to go. And if you can get yourself into a clinic, depending on, your treatment with that Lyme literate doctor, if you can get yourself into a clinic, if you have the money, go down that route if you can get it covered. Some countries offer grants, and, if you can avail of that. I know there's other clinics out there. I think there's one in New Mexico. It's supposed to be quite good and quite reasonably priced. So, yeah.
What's a favorite self-care activity that helps you feel better on difficult days?
The infrared therapy, actually. So I go to the infrared therapy, and it used to get rid of my pain. And because you detox, obviously, so you sweat everything out. So I used to find that really useful for pain, and yeah, and for relaxation as well. But I also find it's doing my body good, and love the infusions.
What's your biggest goal for the future as an advocate for Lyme disease patients?
Sorry, what's my biggest goal for the future in general?
As an advocate for Lyme disease patients.
So what do I hope to achieve on behalf of the chronic Lyme community? I suppose awareness, just to create more awareness around the illness. And, I got a lot of emails from people all over the world in the last year. So it's nice to be able to help people out as well through social media. So if we can do that much, and maybe I'll probably get an article in the paper again, because it's really important to. But what I did here in Galway is I linked with local TDs to get signs put up. And so they're going to put signs up in Galway City and Galway County, and hopefully they'll put more signs up in the rest of the country in Ireland. So looking forward to those. The motion was passed in both government offices. So they're going to go ahead and put the signs up. So that's quite a huge step. So really excited about that. That'll really create awareness around the presence of ticks, and, make sure that people check themselves.
So what code helps you push through tough times?
Friends. Being able to reach out to people that understand. So, and I use that line of communication. That's what Lyme taught me to do, So it's really important to have a support network where you can do that.
Okay. So if audience want to follow your advocacy or learn more about your journey, where they can connect with you online?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok. I think you have the details, don't you? I think I sent you on the details. I trying to remember myself. I'm on TikTok under Justice for Chronic Lyme Disease. I think that's right. And I think my email address is aoife.rankin, all lowercase, @gmail.com. So they can email me if they want. And the contact details are up there on TikTok too.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem.
Mm. So that brings us to the end of today's podcast episode. Aoife, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey with us. Your resilience and dedication to raising awareness for Lyme disease are truly inspiring. To anyone listening, remember, you are not alone in your journey. Aoife, you have shown up the power of persistence and hope in the face of adversity. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning into this meaningful conversation. Healing is not always a straight path, but stories like Aoife remind us that hope and progress are always possible. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who may need it. And don't forget to follow us for more real stories from the Lyme community. Until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and stay supporting one another. Thank you.